On behalf of the Lester and Michael Lester Wendt Character Initiative and the University of Dubuque, welcome. I'm Annalie Ward, the director of the Wendt Center for Character Education, a center whose mission is rooted in the university's mission and Reformed Christian identity, and which fosters intellectual understanding of and personal commitment to lives of purpose and excellent moral character. Here we strive to be people defined by their integrity, characterized by their commitments to truthfulness and honesty, people defined by justice as they treat others fairly, and people defined by their compassion as they practice the Golden Rule. It's a big challenge, but it's something we are committed to as a worthy pursuit. At this time, I'd love to make a safety announcement. Please be aware of where the exits are, marked by the green signs, and in case of emergency, your ushers will have instructions on how to exit safely. It's also a wonderful time to turn off your mobile devices. Put them out. I invite you to be fully present here tonight, and just give yourself a break from technology for a little while. I'd like to begin by asking God's blessing. Will you join me in prayer? Almighty and Creator God, for your glory you made us, and made us in your very image. You, a God of compassion and justice, a God who sacrificed your only Son for us. We praise you for your love and faithfulness. And God, we thank you for this country, a country where we can live in peace, where we're free to worship you, free to live lives of purpose. Thank you, too, for the men and women who have served and continue to serve in the military. They're examples of honor, of discipline, and of sacrifice, are humbling reminders that freedom comes with a cost. Forgive us, gracious God, when we abandon the common good for our own individual gain, or when self-interest takes precedence over other people's needs. Give us courage to work for a world that reflects your goodness. Sustain us, teach us, grow us into a people whose many gifts serve your world through your one Spirit. Amen. I'd like to introduce our speaker, I'd like to welcome our assistant football coach, full-time seminary student, and former teammate of our speaker, Coach Mike Schmidt.
Good evening. Tonight you'll hear a story of sacrifice. You'll hear a story of legendary heroism and legendary leadership. And you'll hear a story of a man whose faith breathes hope into mankind. Jason Church was born in Fort Knox, Kentucky on February 23rd, 1989, and is a 2007 graduate of Menominee High School in Menominee, Wisconsin, my own alma mater. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. It was also a 4-year letter winner and my teammate on the football team there, and a cadet in the ROTC program. Upon graduation, Jason commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. He completed Infantry Basic Officer Leader course at Fort Benning, Georgia, and while stationed there, graduated from the U.S. Army Ranger School, Army Airborne School, and Stryker Leader course. Upon the completion of his training, First Lieutenant Church was assigned to Fort Lewis in Washington, and in May 2012, First Lieutenant Church was deployed with his unit to Afghanistan. On August 23rd, 2012, while in Afghanistan, First Lieutenant Church and 9 other members of his platoon were involved in an IED explosion. Jason was immediately transported to Kandahar airfield by helicopter. The IED blast resulted in the amputation of both legs below the knee. First Lieutenant Church went through 21 surgeries at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland before receiving his prosthetics and going through a grueling recovery process. Jason was promoted to captain and medically retired from the Army on July 31st, 2014. Jason's military awards include, here we go, the Purple Heart, Army Commendation Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon, Combat Infantryman Badge, Airborne Parachutist Badge, and Ranger Tab. He also received the 2014 NCAA Inspirational Award at the 2014 NCAA National Convention. Jason currently attends Georgetown University in pursuit of his Master's of Arts in U.S. Security Policy and plans on attending law school next fall. He speaks around the country to various schools, companies, and organizations about overcoming adversity and the power of a positive attitude. It's my pleasure, totally my pleasure, to welcome a man that I love like a little brother, but respect and admire like an older one. Please welcome Jason Church.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Dr. Ward, for the kind introduction here today. I'll be using slides and pictures and quotes in a video tonight. I am a college student, much like many of you in the audience tonight, and I really liked it when the speaker augments the presentation with some visual aids. I just seem to get more out of it, and trust that'll be the case with you too this evening. So tonight, I'm going to give you my story, and then I'm going to give you 3 life lessons that I've learned in the short 25 years I've been on this earth. After that, I'll open the floor up to questions. I have found that when you want to convince people of something that you're very passionate about, it is important to lay a solid foundation. Make sure that people understand where you're coming from. I'm going to attempt to do that tonight by telling you my story. So, as Coach Schmidt just said, I went and graduated from Menominee High School in 2007. I was a football player, played on the hockey team, and was a track athlete. Most importantly, I feel that my time in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes helped mold me as a young man. I was an FCA huddle leader for 2 years, got to know many, many great Christians, and it helped mold me into the man that I hope to become. When I went to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, I played football for 4 years, and I was part of the ROTC program. I was lucky to have such accommodating professors, military instructors, and coaches to be able to balance the rigors of being a student, athlete, cadet. I also was a high school hockey coach. I've always had a passion for coaching, and I really enjoyed being able to teach young high school hockey players a thing or two around the rink. I majored in political science and graduated in 2011. There's a picture of me, and as the football coaches probably note in this room, I am way too high coming out of my stance. And there's one of me coaching hockey with my brothers against me and my father on the other sideline or other bench. So, 5 days after I graduate, I head down to Fort Benning, Georgia. In fact, my orders had changed. I was originally supposed to leave 5 or 6 months later. I had planned on staying in La Crosse for a little bit as a recruiter, but the Army has a way of making you go places when you least expect it. I showed up at Infantry Officer Basic Course with 39 other lieutenants in my platoon and 140 recently commissioned second lieutenants. The I-Bullet course is designed to familiarize new lieutenants with infantry basic skills, tactics, maneuvers, fires, things that you need to know on the battlefield. I developed a lot of close friendships. Often hard times bold and mend those friendships. I then attended Army Ranger School. Now, some people are unfamiliar or may not be quite understanding what goes on in this environment, but it is a leadership school. Army Ranger School is 61 days, or in my case, I got the extended course of 89 days of being put into a situation where you're mentally, emotionally, and physically pushing yourself to limits I didn't know I had. You are put on a diet of about 1,800 calories a day, marched on average of 15 to 20 miles a day, with about 3 hours of sleep throughout the duration of the course. Now, what does this teach you? Well, it teaches you some hand-to-hand combat, teaches you how to fight, teaches you how to conquer your fears. If you had a fear of heights, you wouldn't after that school. It teaches you how to suck it up. See, leading men in combat is no easy thing. And the skills required to do such a thing require training that closely simulates what it is like to be on a battlefield, depriving you of food, depriving you of sleep, depriving you of any emotional freedom. That simulates combat stress. Being able to lead fellow Rangers when they are tired, hungry, is a very, very hard thing to do. But it teaches you mental toughness. It teaches you what true mental toughness is. So, the happiest day of Ranger School was the day I got to leave. Ranger School graduation. There were some of my friends from my platoon. As you can see, we're all very happy. So, soon after, packed my bags again and moved across the country. From Fort Benning, Georgia to Fort Lewis, Washington, just south of Seattle, Tacoma. It was there I joined my unit, the 1st of the 23rd Infantry Battalion, 3rd Brigade, 2nd Infantry Division. They're a Stryker battalion, and I'll show you what a Stryker is in a minute, but it's a very big vehicle. But I got what I wanted from my undergraduate career. I got to be a platoon leader. It was a dream of mine since I saw my dad put on a uniform when I could barely speak. Being in charge of 40 men in combat is an experience and a responsibility that very few have ever had the opportunity to take part of. But I didn't get it right away. You see, when I arrived there, I still needed to prove to my unit that I was competent, that I was able to lead. They didn't know who I was. You had to put in your time, suck it up, drive on. And after a while, they finally actually gave me my platoon while I was in Afghanistan. So before I get into some of the specific details about Afghanistan, I want to tell you a little bit about what a Stryker vehicle is, because I mentioned that a few times. Now, a Stryker vehicle is typically an urban terrain combat vehicle. This is made to go in between buildings and withstand strikes. It is a mounted gun position that can give us support by fire. But as you can see, it's a pretty heavy-duty machine. It's a transport vehicle. Infantry soldiers typically do not fight from it. We dismount or get out of the vehicle and then attack the objective. But on the top of that vehicle is a 50 cal machine gun, or in this case, it's actually a Mark 19 grenade launcher. And then with us, we had surrounding cages to prohibit RPGs from penetrating the hull. It's a very, very intimidating vehicle. So, that's what I was in charge of, 3 of those, about $20 million worth of equipment. So if you want to learn some responsibility, at least monetarily, be put in charge of about $20 million worth of equipment. Afghanistan. So in order to kind of get a little bit more understanding of my story, I think it's important to kind of understand where I was walking around. Afghanistan is a landlocked country, which many of you are familiar with, about the size of Texas. It's very, very old. Alexander the Great pushed about as far as he could into Afghanistan. It's been known as the graveyard of empires. The British, the Soviets, and the United States have all, at one point or another, conducted warfare operations in the country. As you can see, it is landlocked. Capital is Kabul, but there's also the big city of Kandahar, which you can see under the arrow at the bottom there, was where I was located in the country. It's about 33 million people, and it is very, very tribal. Afghans don't identify themselves as Afghans. It'd be like someone from Texas saying they weren't from the United States, but they were from Texas. The divisions in that country run deep and old. Pashtuns, Tajiks, different ethnic groups simply do not get along. And it's part of the problem we're having there today. So, before I get into that specific day, I wanted to give you kind of an idea of the life of a soldier in an outpost in Afghanistan. Where we were at was a very kinetic area. In fact, the Canadians were there before us and had sustained massive casualties. In fact, it's some of the most the Canadians have had since World War II. It was the spiritual home of Mullah Omar. Mullah Omar is the leader and the founder of the Taliban. He literally grew up across the riverbed at which I went to bed every night. That means the local population that surrounded me was very sympathetic to their cause. But in order to break the Taliban's back, we had to go to the source, which is why we were in Panjwai, Afghanistan, that area I just pointed to on the map. We'd go on patrols every day, and every day we sustained casualties. We had some lose their lives, and we were in consistent firefights. It was not a very good area of the world. It really wasn't. In fact, I was just having this conversation with Coach Mick and Coach Schmidt and my mother before I came on stage here tonight. And I want to hit something that I didn't realize was so important to me until I just mentioned it to them earlier. When we'd go out on patrol in Afghanistan, you'd see small children running around the country. Small, 4 or 5 years old. And I'd be on that one big vehicle I just showed you. And they'd come up, and they would just do this on their finger. That was their way of communicating to me that they just wanted a piece of paper and a pen to write on. Now that really hit me. As I was standing there looking out and looking at this small child, there's a part of me that just realized that this child is never going to learn how to read, never going to learn how to write, let alone know anything different than the 1 mile by 1 mile square they've grown up, were born, and will die in. That just made me realize how great we have it here. So, August 23rd, 2012. Another typical routine patrol for my platoon. We had some intelligence in the area that the enemy was moving what we called homemade explosive IED devices through our AO, or area of operation. We were going to go into this outpost, set up a little camp, and kind of interdict the travel coming to and from the enemy's point of origin. On our way out, we stepped out of our vehicles and began to clear the area in front of us. Now, moving in Afghanistan isn't quite the same as how we would move in previous conflicts. Because we're doing counterinsurgency operations, we would typically move in a file. It was very unorthodox, but it kind of was for the local population to see us. So what we would do is we'd walk in a straight line, and there was a man who'd walk in the front of that line. In my case, it was a private by the name of Cody Armstrong, a young man from Mississippi. He had this mine detecting device that he'd have in front of him. And he would walk across and sweep. Now, this is the most dangerous job in the world, bar none. In fact, just 2 days prior, someone in his exact position in a sister platoon died from an IED blast. Because if he's wrong, either he is caught in the explosion or someone right behind him is. Well, that's how we were moving into this area. As we approached the village that we were going to go and set up our little outpost in, I saw a few red flags kind of pop up. You're there long enough, you kind of start to sense when something's just not right. You get that sixth sense. So I stopped my platoon, and I called back up to my commander, and I said, "Sir, this is bad juju here. There's no kids running through the streets. There's rock formations in the distance. The place is a ghost town." He agreed with me and said, "Roger that. I'll come to your location and we'll confirm this." It was at this exact moment that an IED went off. One of my soldiers stepped on an IED about 10 meters away from me. However, it malfunctioned. It was kind of like a Roman candle tipped on its side. It smelled like manure because the material they used to make the device was dried nitrates from fertilizer. But that told me something. It wasn't that Cody Armstrong wasn't doing a good job, because he was. It's just sometimes the mine devices just didn't work. And we had been walking over basically what was a field of IEDs. At this point, I made the decision, we're getting out of here. I'm not waiting for my commander to verify this. I mean, obviously, we've already had one go off. So I realized I looked to my right and saw a field of grapes in front of me, kind of on grape rows. That's a crop that could be grown in Afghanistan, was green grapes. And there's this mud wall about 5 feet tall in front of me. Mud walls weren't exactly that strong, but they would require a good shoulder to knock them over. We thought the best route to get out of there would be going through this grape field because, well, you're probably not going to put an IED in a field that you're trying to tend the grapes to. So I took that old football frame with all my weight and all my gear on and all my pads and everything else, started hitting that wall as hard as I could, me and a specialist by the name of Farmer. It was at that exact moment that my world went dark. As I came to, and the dust is settling around me, I can hear the screaming of my men around me, that I looked down and I realized the legs I'd stood on for the first 23 years of my life are gone in an instant. It's a lot to take in 2 seconds. But, like my training has told me, I started to grab my tourniquet. You see, the leading cause of death in the battlefield is blood loss. You only have so much blood in your body, and when you have an open wound like that, you will bleed out very quickly. So putting a tourniquet on is your best chance of survival. But in my condition, I was not doing a very good job of putting that tourniquet on. So, a young man by the name of Brian Pacelli, not much older than 20 years old, the platoon medic, runs up to me with reckless abandon. You know, there's that brotherhood and that bond you have in combat, and Brian Pacelli exemplifies that. You see, the enemy would often place IEDs right next to an initial explosion. The reason they did this is because they know that Americans run to the aid of their fallen comrade. It's just what we do. And they would hope to get the medic in the process. Luckily, in this case, either no such IED existed or it didn't explode. Brian came on, slapped those tourniquets on my legs, and saved my life. He stopped me from bleeding to death. But the thing is, it didn't stop right there. You see, where I was injured, you couldn't land a helicopter at. There was buildings around, there was grapes around. There was no LZ for a helicopter. So, my men had to take the old 225-pound football player with body armor, weapon, blood loss, bleeding everywhere, and carried me 200 meters over the top of 13 grape rows. Took the entire platoon. Former Louisville football player in there, a couple 500-pound bench press guys. Carried me to the LZ right after I fell off the improvised litter, literally just held on to me and carried me to that helicopter. Saved my life. You see, it was in those moments I was down there and I was on the ground that I felt at ease. And this goes back to my thing about FCA and its importance to me. You see, when something like that goes off and your world changes in an instant, but I was calm. Because I knew if it was my time to go, if it was my time to meet our Creator, I was ready. I don't think I could have served in that country if I hadn't believed that. And I don't believe that. That's what kept me alive. So, they get me in the helicopter, but my battle has just begun. The golden hour is the hour after an injury, at which is the best chance for survival for an injured service member. They say if they can get you on the operating table within an hour, your chances of survival are about 98%. It's very high for my type of injury. So, they got me into the hospital in Kandahar, where they performed, obviously, immediate emergency surgery. They tried to salvage as much of the limbs below my knees that they could. From there, I hopped on a plane to Landstuhl, Germany. It's kind of the intermediate point between Afghanistan and the United States. Now, my mother can certainly attest to this. They thought they were going to have to fly my parents to Germany. You see, my condition when I was initially in Landstuhl was not very stable. And to be honest with you, if they tend to send family members over to Germany, it's usually not a very good sign. So they were certainly worried. But I was able to push through, and they said I was stable enough to come back stateside. So there's my first picture, 5 days after the IED exploded. That is at the intensive care unit in Walter Reed. Walter Reed is an amazing facility. Unfortunately, because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we've become very, very good at treating injuries such as mine. In fact, actually, the surgeons who operated on me, if heaven forbid the President of the United States were shot tonight, would be operating on him. Because of the complexity of my injuries, the amount of fertilizer that was shot up into my legs when they were separated from me, I needed 21 surgeries to clean everything that was in there. It took a long time. But they know that you have to clean all of that out. You don't want the chance of infection to happen. And that is a big, big problem. Once they close me up, if there's something in there, that could pose a serious threat to my limbs and my life. But the surgeons did a tremendous job. They were able to clean out every single bit of it. We had one little mishap, and that's something I'm going to get into one second here. This is, again, me recovering in the ICU. Was this right here. So one of the procedures that we wanted to try and do was something where they were going to take part of my lat muscle out of my back and actually attach it to the bottom part of my left leg. Now, the reason they do this is because if you, in a blast such as mine, the amputation is never clean. In fact, I had more bone than I actually had tissue and skin to put around the bone. So one of the things they were going to do was take part of my lat muscle out and then attach it to the bottom and give me a little bit more tissue so that bone could stay there, because the more limb you have, the easier it is to walk. However, my body actually rejected its own organ, its own tissue, its own skin. I almost died on the table that night. I was in surgery for 12 hours and again, lost a lot of blood. But again, I pushed through, mostly thanks to the person who was sitting beside me in my bed, my mother. So, one of the things I got to do while I was in the hospital was meet some interesting people. One of them is the President of the United States. No matter what your political ideology is, it's always tremendously uplifting to meet the commander-in-chief of the force that you're a part of. And I will say he was very thankful, very supportive, and very humble in talking to me. But I will say that my mother was my greatest battle buddy during this time. Going through the hospital, sitting next to me when I was on some very, very hardcore drugs. Very hardcore drugs. She kept me sane. I never give her enough credit. In fact, I generally give her a hard time more than anything. But she's one of the reasons I'm standing in front of you today. One thing I was stubborn and really wanted to do when I was in the hospital was receive my Purple Heart, where I played football and was in the ROTC program. You see, normally a Purple Heart's given to a soldier by a superior officer, usually a general. Sometimes the President of the United States is giving it to people. But I wanted my father to do it. My father is a now retired colonel from the United States Army, and he asked me bedside if he could be the one that would present me this award. I couldn't say no. But I couldn't think of any better venue to do it in than the field I played for 4 years. It's one of the most emotional moments of my life, because the doctors had told me that I shouldn't be in prosthetic limbs 2 months after losing my legs. I'm known for my stubbornness. I was going to stand when my father gave me that award. Now, the doctors kept warning me to not do it, but I said, there's no way I'm going to be sitting down if I can stand and receive that award from my father. And I'll show you a little later a video of that event. There's a picture of my residual limbs. At this point, I was about 4 months after the injury, and I was at the point where my skin was getting tough enough that I could start putting on a prosthetic limb. But it's not easy. Learning to walk again. Being a former athlete, I was driven, and I had some motor skills that a lot of my peers may not have had. It allowed me to progress relatively quickly. As you can see right there, my prosthetist is helping me fit my legs, and the physical therapist is standing right behind me in these bars that allow me to maintain my balance as I'm walking. Now you see I've progressed over there, and I'm walking with my physical therapist on crutches. It is a long process that took time. But within 6 months, I was walking with some assistance from a cane again. I've gotten to do a lot of great things, and sometimes I think the best therapy that I've ever received has been from physical activity. This right here was a Wounded Warrior bike trip where we biked across all of South Florida. It's one of those things that you see the difference in people. You know, when you come back from something like Afghanistan, you have the catastrophic injuries, not catastrophic, but horrible injuries that have occurred to a lot of the guys. Guys sometimes become a former shell of themselves. They don't know who they are. They have a hard time identifying themselves. I was lucky to not have that issue because of the support that I have been given. But a lot of guys, you can see from night and day their attitudes after going out and physically engaging themselves again. Remember, we're a bunch of guys that don't like to sit down very much. Getting them out there on the bikes, you can see the change in people. And I could see it myself. I like to ski now. I use a mono ski. I sit down in this bucket, and I can fly down a hill probably faster than you can. Probably not a good idea. But it is one of the rehabilitative things that has kept me moving. One of the greater things about 10 months after I was injured was, well, longer than that, over a year after I was injured, I got to go to my brother's basic training graduation. As you can see in that picture right there, I'm sitting on the far left, my mother to my right, my father to her right, and then my youngest brother on the far right. Very proud moment. You know, I'm one of many in my family that has served. My father, my uncle, both my grandfathers, and my younger brother have all donned an Army uniform. So as you can see now, as you can see in front of you, I'm standing on my own 2 feet. I've gone through extensive amounts of rehab. I've been through some of the most adverse situations I think I could put myself through at my age. And I'm still standing in front of you today. As you can see, my golf swing has not gotten any better despite this. I want to show you a video quick before I get into my life lessons learned of one of the things I was able to do with some of the work of modern medicine. As you see, I was a former hockey player, and the one thing I wanted to do was get back on the ice and skate. My prosthetists say I actually skate better than I walk. Funny enough. I have been able to do a lot of things with the help of my family, friends, medical personnel, and I wouldn't be where I'm at if it weren't for them. So, before I get into my life lessons learned tonight, I want to show you a video. This is one that was put together for me when I received my Inspiration Award. I think it does a good job of summing up some of the quick, immediate aftermath of my injury. One of the greatest experiences of my life was being able to play collegiate sports. And what it taught me more than anything was how to work as a team. So when I was with my peers on the football field, when they were looking for leadership, when they were looking for, that issue of running up on 4th and 1, and it's, we're dead tired because we've been out there for 12 plays, that ability to motivate at that time of kind of feeling sorry for yourself, I think can go a long, long ways. I think that's what football really taught me.
For Jason, he was out on a patrol with his platoon in Afghanistan, and the short version is he stepped on an IED.
At that point, my world went dark. But as I came to, I rolled onto my back, and as I looked down, I realized that the legs I'd stood on for about 23 years were gone. Now, that's a tough thing to realize in about 3 seconds. The one overlying emotion is, when am I going to be back to normal? What is going to be my new normal? And then, as I came into Walter Reed, I got to meet a lot of the other injured veterans. When I see them walking around, when I saw them walk into my room and say, "Hey, you're going to be taken care of, you're fine." I said, "Look, if I had pants on, you couldn't tell, but I lost my legs." When I have guys that have far more significant injuries than I have, that set the tone for me to never have a pity party. My father had asked me if he could be the one that presented the Purple Heart to me. I said, absolutely. My dad's a colonel in the Army and is authorized to do that. And in that environment, in that setting, to do what we did there, obviously that's a moment that lives on in our lives for forever, really. I've had physical therapy now for getting close to a year, and it's obviously the reason I'm able to walk around with the ease I do. And for me, being a former athlete, I always want to be perfect at everything, and it's always they have to usually pull the reins back on me a little bit to make sure I don't overdo it sometimes. To take me from where I was a year ago to where I am now is a feat in itself. It's that sense of normal. That sense of normal I was talking about earlier. That new normal for me. Yeah, I put my pants on a little different than people do in the morning. I don't put them on one leg at a time like everyone else does. But if something comes up in your life and it sucks, it's terrible, it's life-changing, that doesn't mean it has to change who you are and how you go about your day and who you want to be. And for me, that's the most powerful thing I feel like I can tell people. There's all sorts of lessons that I've learned from this. But the biggest one is not to define yourself by the little setbacks that have happened in your life. So that is my story. It's been a journey that I would not wish on anyone. But at the same time, I've learned lessons that I know have made me a better person. Lessons that have put things into perspective for me that I feel is unique to a person my age. I want to share a few of those lessons from that perspective with you tonight. Lessons that I know, if you apply them, will strengthen and reinforce your character just like they did mine. The first lesson for me, what I learned in Ranger School in Afghanistan is this: leadership and relationships require a delicate balance between caring and candor. You do not truly care about someone unless you are willing to be candid. You cannot be candid with someone unless you truly care about them. It is almost a which comes first, the chicken or the egg paradigm. I learned that caring values the soldier. Candor values the future or potential that soldier possesses. Candor values the soldier enough to be totally honest with him or her. You must be willing to demonstrate both to the soldier to be successful as a leader. You must demonstrate both to your peers, subordinates, to your family, to anyone you have a relationship with, if you want that relationship to grow and be all that it can be. For most of us, caring is significantly easier than candor. It certainly was for me. My parents taught me early on to treat others as you want to be treated. It is the honesty that we struggle with. Delivering a message that may not be well received, one that might initially hurt someone's feelings. In Ranger School, the instructors had no problem with frankness. It was expected, and they delivered it. What came from that sincerity? Well, a better soldier, a better leader, a person who wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. Unfortunately, many people in leadership roles or in relationships simply do not value candor enough. Instead, they avoid conflict and never say what needs to be said. They don't engage in candid conversations because it's easier not to. Let's just ignore the opportunity or issue, and maybe it'll go away. They suppress any urge to provide comments or constructive criticism because doing so can be awkward and messy. It might hurt someone's feelings. I'm not advocating a style of conversation that is unprofessional or degrading, by no means. I'm talking about a person with the character to tell a friend, subordinate, peer, the truth, even when it may be hard to swallow. And doing so in a manner that shows sincere compassion, does not attack the individual, and has the individual's best interests as its sole purpose. The desire to avoid conflict is human nature, but it represents one of the most significant obstacles to success for leaders in relationship building. Lack of candor slows everything down and leads to bad decisions. When candor is absent, finger-pointing, mistrust, and frustration fill the void. In the Army environment I came from, a lack of candor could lead to soldiers dying. I am being candid with you tonight. Having a soldier under your leadership who could not do their job was not the norm. However, it did happen. This soldier needed to be addressed, retrained, or replaced. My primary purpose for pointing this out is founded on the principle that if candor isn't a part of your character, your professional discourse, it will make it nearly impossible for those you are dealing with to get better. The goal of being candid is to allow both you and those around you to excel by being real. And it is the concept of making candor part of your character that is critical. Candor is not something that can be turned on or off. Rather, it is a personal value expressed in who you are. It becomes part of your character. The second aspect of character has come to the forefront since my injuries and disability is reliability. In the Army, they call it doing your duty. When you're reliable, others know that they can depend on you. Others know that you'll make every necessary step and effort to do your best, no matter what the situation. They know that you will not run, cower, or become paralyzed with fear. People learn that they can count on you for your trustworthiness and consistency. You will still be there, giving it your all, when others have said, I have had enough. Reliability, or a sense of duty, earns the respect of those around us. It seems nowadays people focus far more on their rights than on their responsibilities. Responsible people don't protest this way. The words, "that's not my job," don't cross their mind, let alone come out of their mouth. They are willing to do whatever it takes to complete their work, needed by their organization, whether it be the Army, business, or an athletic team. Ranger School made discerning who was reliable and who wasn't very easy. Nobody got enough sleep, and nobody got enough to eat. Yet there were guys you know you could count on regardless of the situation. And they were the guys who would only do, and there were those guys who would do only what they had to do to get by. Capability doesn't have anything to do with reliability. Some people don't possess very much capability as others, or as much capability as others, but they make up for it by being reliable. Or as we say in the Army, they always have your back. The ultimate quality of a responsible person is the ability to finish a job. In An Open Road, Mr. Richard Evan writes, "It is priceless to find a person who will take responsibility, who will finish and follow through to the final detail, to know when someone has accepted an assignment that it will be effectively and consciously completed." I saw this when an IED went off in Afghanistan, and my life was hanging in the balance. As I mentioned before, that young private by the name of Brian Pacelli came running to my aid immediately. I knew I could count on him. This medic did not for one moment think of his own safety. This medic knew full well, like I mentioned earlier, the enemy put secondary IEDs right next to the initial one. Private Pacelli was reliable. He knew his duty. He had my back and the back of everyone else's in that platoon. He ran to my aid and, like I said, slapped those 2 tourniquets on. That stopped me from bleeding to death. I cannot imagine serving in a unit or working in a business or being on a team where people are not reliable, where people have a me-first attitude. Serving or working where you cannot count on your buddies or partners or teammates has to be one of the worst feelings in the world. In the Army, we qualify with our individual weapons and with our crew-served weapons. When a soldier misses the target with a shot, he turns and looks at the fault within himself. Failure to hit the target is not the target's fault. To improve your aim, you must improve yourself. Are you hitting the target when it comes to your responsibility? Do your people around you see you as hitting the target? Do you finish what you start? If the answer to any of these questions is no, then you need to develop a stronger sense of responsibility. The final lesson I'd like to share with you this evening is how a positive attitude can get you through times in your life when the average person might just cash it in. I'm going to try and convince you that no matter what happens to you, what matters is what happens in you. People with a positive attitude are optimists. If something bad comes their way, a person with a positive attitude tends to write it off as an isolated incident, an anomaly, or something that is simply out of their control. They do not dwell on it. You do not see positive people feeling sorry for their circumstances or dwelling on the way they have been treated. They have learned to take responsibility for their actions and for their outcomes. Positive people also understand the fact that frequently life just isn't fair. I know that, and I've certainly gotten over it. You can too, if you really want to. If you don't, you'll never accomplish what you could accomplish. You'll spend more time complaining about your boss, your spouse, some professor or coach, or something else that isn't exactly the way you want it. A pessimist is a person who nurtures a consistently negative attitude, expecting the worst of people and the worst of situations. This outlook will persist regardless of facts or circumstances that might indicate a more balanced or positive approach when appropriate. As a leader, you must stay positive. You must stay positive. See yourself as a cause, not an effect. You don't have to be the product or a victim of your own circumstances. Armies, companies, teams, all need leaders who stop thinking about what has happened to them and think about what they can make happen. I have seen how success in combat is achieved by maintaining the initiative. I am sure the same is true in life. Life involves taking risks every single day, and not all of them are going to end positively. No one in their right mind would deny that. That's why it's called a risk. The flip side is that many well-calculated risks will lead to positive results. Commanders, managers, coaches, look for leaders that have a mixed bag of results. What separates outstanding leaders from the marginal ones is how a person reacts to the results of that risk just taken. What is their character made of? For well-trained, positive leaders, eventually the good stuff will outweigh the bad. But you'll never reach that point unless you put yourself out there. And you will never put yourself out there if you're not willing to think positive results are coming. At its core, pessimism and negative attitudes are impractical because they cause you to spend more time dwelling on things that haven't happened yet and aren't even guaranteed to happen. It also prevents you from getting things done. Pessimism breeds indecision. Pessimism is a waste of time, and time is a limited resource I don't think anyone has to waste. I spent my time in the Army striving to maintain a positive attitude during some very difficult times. Ranger School and combat in Afghanistan were very challenging. During these times, I knew that I could not expect those subordinate to me to stay positive if I, as their leader, did not do it myself. Any leader who does not possess a positive attitude must be content with mediocrity, no matter how impressive their other talents may be. Because without a positive attitude, you don't have energy. A negative attitude saps that energy. Without energy, I know you'll get very little accomplished. As a junior officer, I believe I have succeeded more than I have failed when it comes to my attitude. However, I was never tested like I was at Walter Reed. After those 21 surgeries on my legs and 5 weeks in a hospital bed, it was time for rehab. It was at this point my attitude would play a significant role in my future. The doctors and nurses had done all they could. Now, the onus was on me. What kind of attitude would I take to rehab? Does attitude really make a difference? My coaches had always told me it did. I had always believed it did. What would the attitude of those who were rehabbing with me be? Like attitudes do attract like attitudes. The Walter Reed staff knows what they're doing. Unfortunately, they've had to get very good at dealing with wounded warriors. They know how critical attitude is in the recovery process for wounded warriors. That is why the staff puts the recent wounded warriors with the veterans, those who have been there a long time, who have demonstrated the positive attitude to push through their injuries. The hope is that this will influence the recently injured wounded warriors. It does work. I can attest to that. The bottom line is this. Me and my wounded warriors buddies may have lost our hands, we may have lost our arms, we may have lost our legs, but me and my battle buddies did not lose our hearts. You cannot let this happen to you. When it does, the game is over. It's done. Unfortunately, there are those who have. You see, the opposite is just as true. Those with negative attitudes eventually find another negative attitude to hang out with. The staff tries to break up this pity party by putting the negative attitudes back with the positive ones. It truly breaks your heart to see someone give up. I honestly believe my mother spent more time crying and praying for those who had given up than she did for me. And as I reflect on that reason why, she knew there was no prosthetic for a negative attitude. There's no operation that can fix that. No one can change an attitude but the owner of that attitude. You see, life circumstances may force you to change your goals, but life circumstances cannot change your attitude. You control that. You decide what your attitude will be. John Maxwell was spot on when he said, "The greatest day in your life and mine is when we take control and total responsibility for our attitudes. That's the day we truly grow up." Now, be balanced. Take a step back every so often. Nobody is suggesting that you become oblivious to reality, pretending that nothing bad can or will ever happen. Doing so can lead to poor decisions and invites others to take advantage of you. Instead, be a rational optimist who takes the good with the bad. Prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. Preparing for the worst makes you sensible, and hoping for the best ensures a positive attitude. Combined, they make you a person others will look up to, a person others will follow, a person of character. I truly appreciate being here this evening and all the hospitality you have shown me, my mother, and my grandparents. I enjoyed sharing my story and 3 qualities that have made a significant difference in my life. I firmly believe that these qualities will have a significant impact on your life if you commit to making them a part of your character on a daily basis. Thank you. God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry that went a little longer than I thought it was going to, but if you have any questions, the floor is open. I know it wasn't that thrilling. Could you come down to the microphone so everyone hears it if you have a question? Or that one?
You said you got a Ranger tat. Did you get the scroll?
I was not part of the battalion.
Okay.
It's okay. I planned on it. I was going to drop a packet, but this hurt. Yeah.
During your Ranger training, what was the hardest part of all that? And during that, or maybe during rehab, I know you talked about being an optimist, but was there ever a time when you kind of just lost it at all?
Sure. So the hardest part in Ranger School, I would say there was a part, so Ranger School is divided up into 3 phases. There's Fort Benning phase, which is kind of a crawl phase. There's Dahlonega, which is in northern Georgia, which is actually kind of on some mountain tops out there, which is mountain phase, and then there's swamp phase in Florida. For me, it was actually in mountains. You're climbing up mountains all day, and it happened to just start raining on us. You know, and we were out in the field for weeks at a time, so it's not like I go home and shower. So it's raining on us, it's brutal, and I'm the one who's in charge of the element this time. And you think it's hard enough motivating guys when they're hungry or tired? Try when it's raining nasty and you're trying to carry a litter up the side of a mountaintop. Trying to motivate them, you know, I tried to do it by personal example, by grabbing it myself. I remember just being so thoroughly exhausted at the end of it that one of my buddies, because you develop that kind of spirit de corps I was talking about, actually helped me out a lot at the end of the night, helping set up the patrol base, because I was just so exhausted. I don't think I'd ever have been to that point in my life. And then as for times in therapy where I ever felt like I was down in the dumps, you know, I can honestly say to you that that has not been the case for me. And it's not because I somehow magically can do that, but because when I was in there every single day, and I saw guys that were missing 4 limbs, guys that were hip disarticulations, that means they have an amputation so high up that some men could not be biological fathers. When I see those things, this is a paper cut. It's a paper cut. Drive on. That's how I view it. So, yeah.
You told us you were part of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes when you were in college. Can you speak to how that faith was with you, both as a ranger and a battalion leader? Did you carry that faith within the group? And what is your faith life like today?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't take, I mean, that's quite a promotion you just gave me. As a platoon leader. The battalion, I'd have been in charge of about 800 people, but that's so being part of FCA, I was in high school. I was a huddle leader, and then I was involved in my family's church growing up. And you know, when you're in Ranger School, when you're in those positions and you're in those situations where, you know, you're just in very deprived settings where, you know, you have to hold on to something. And that really taught me the strength of faith. For me, I don't think it was any more evident to me than when I was actually injured and laying on the ground, because I thought that it might actually be my time to go. And I was calm. I was at ease. And for me, that is the most significant standing block for me with my faith. Today, you know, I read the Bible, I do various other things. I'm probably not as active in my church as I'd like to be, but I can still honestly say that my faith is what probably kept me alive, kept my blood pressure probably low enough where I wasn't speeding out. So.
Yes, sir, at the times when you felt like giving up, what was the first thing that came across your mind that you grabbed onto to keep your motivation high?
Well, I mean, you know, I think that mean, besides what I'd mentioned before, I don't like the idea of something defining me. So I don't want my disability to define who I am. It's a part of me, but it's not me. It's not all of me. And to be honest with you, I just wanted to get back at it. I guess, after you sit down for a little while and you're in those situations and you're in those hospital rooms, it just kind of it's a little monotonous, and I kind of wanted to, hit back at it. So I was active my entire life. It's very difficult for me to not have that lifestyle. So when I was, the only time that I guess I'd ever be really frustrated is when something would happen with my legs. I mean, just the personal, like, okay, I can't walk today, some skin graft broke down. But again, like I said before, you go down and see those guys that are far harder circumstances and situations than I am, and they're plugging away. Again, you see that, again, like I said, like a paper cut. So.
You're a sportsman. I've seen you playing hockey and football and lifting weights and everything. What's your favorite exercise now? What's your favorite form of recreation, exercise, workout?
Sure. Well, I mean, I usually work out every day just because that's just how I like to start my mornings off. I've done it for years, and I guess I can't break the habit. Actually, I picked up golf more now. It's actually been very good for me balance-wise to actually teach me how to figure out my legs. I can make the excuse that it's hurt my golf game, but it was never any good in the first place. So, but I actually just picked it up after I was injured. There's a lot of great nonprofits that get guys outlets like that where they can get them onto competitive sports. Because a lot of guys that are in the military that have been injured and women that have been injured at Walter Reed, they want some outlet. They need something competitive. I know a lot of guys who have trained for the Paralympics and things like that. So, but I would say golf is my favorite recreation, and I still do my cardio weightlifting in the morning. So. Okay, my cue here.
Ms. Ward, are you gonna go?
Okay.
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 So,
absolutely.
After hearing your story, you've been through a lot, and one thing I was listening to is how you were never alone throughout this whole entire journey, and I just wanted you to explain, I guess, how important are bonds with other people when you have to go through all this?
Oh, I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, that is, like I was saying, like attitudes attract like attitudes. You want to be around people who are positive and are pushing you. I usually make the joke, and I didn't during the speech, but I will now. So when I was injured, my family support group was very strong. But just because of the injuries that you have, you need a caretaker to help you out. So my poor mother got saddled with me for 9 months. Now, I like to tell people that I didn't move back in with my mom. My mother moved in with me. She's a trooper, and that's honestly what helped me get through a lot. She put up with a lot of, if I was frustrated and I was on some she got the brunt of it. But peers, fellow soldiers, guys that are just with you day in and day out, that bond pushes you, and that's what gets it going. Your friends, your fellow soldiers, and family can be anybody. So I consider my platoon part of my family. I'm always in contact with those guys, usually once every couple weeks. So.
Well, I think you've heard the importance of family and friends, and I just want to acknowledge Jason's family here, and we want to say a special word of thanks to you. And as we've listened to him, we've been reminded of the sacrifice of so many, and I know that we have veterans here, and we're grateful for your service as well. And now, please join me in thanking Jason one last time.